Hello and welcome to another episode of the GCSUNScast. The Gold Coast Suns show by fans for fans. I'm your host Shane. Joining me on the line is Thom. How's it going, Thom?
G'day Shane, how you going today?
Yeah, good. It's a bit disappointing being a Suns fan, isn't it? Having to put up with performances like what we saw on the weekend. There were moments of brilliance, moments of shining light, especially with the NEFL, and we'll get into that later. But it's this time of year, every year, that we have to put up with what we would call a bit of a grind. The video game players amongst us, those that jump on Fortnite and Apex Legends and the such, would certainly know what that grind is, and constantly just doing something for the sake of something good at the end. And that's kind of what Sun supporters are putting themselves through, watching the Suns play every single week. It's certainly, I got to admit, the last couple of weeks where I've tuned out because of my eye injury hasn't been as big of a problem football-wise. I don't think I missed it a single bit. But it's that time of year where everything just sorts of dies down. I mean, we've noticed in our advertising and our marketing on the Facebook just how little people we are sort of reaching at the moment. Not too many fans are sticking on around to pay attention to the show, and I'd imagine that's the same with the Suns as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you've billed it in the lead up as your cynicism and my optimism. So I'll look. I made a conscious decision to leave my previous football team and be a Suns supporter. And at the time, I knew what I was putting myself in for, because I knew it would be a few years of pretty frustrating kind of footy. And then, you know, we had our sort of our false dawn in 2014. Thought that finals were going to happen sooner than later. And there's been a couple of seasons since then where, you know, you sort of get to the middle of the season and there's still some hope. This year, I don't think anyone expected us to be much chop, and we haven't been. But I think there's still quite a few encouraging signs there to see. And certainly my interest hasn't waned as far as the losing, you know, it's attrition really. And then, you know, good news generally it gets followed up by bad news and then worse news. But I actually had a pretty good weekend leading up to the AFL game, the Allies result, and especially the way the Suns Academy guys went in that game, and also the NEFL result, which was a terrific game and gave me lots of hope for the future. And then against the Swans, the second half just made it all see what kind of mountain we got to climb.
Yeah, it doesn't feel any closer than what it did a year ago, didn't it? Despite what was mentioned by one of the commentators during the game, how last year's average losing margin from the Suns was around 50-odd points, and this year they've got it down to about 30 points.
The same commentator also mentioned that the Suns are a creation of the AFL, and what have the AFL done wrong? Because teams go bad, but every other team except for the Giants, who we are obviously measured against, who we know got, you know, significantly more advantages than us for no explicable reason other than the fact that they come from an area that has a larger potential population. But that's rubbish anyway, because Southeast Queensland has a massive population and it's the fastest growing area in the country, and also North Queensland is part of our zone. So look, you know, the AFL's got to do something. The commentators who we're talking about here are no dills, guys like Alistair Lynch, who has seen close up what the Gold Coast is facing, and can see that there are genuine fans. I think a little bit in the media during the week about on SEN, a couple of guys like Mike Sheehan and Kevin Bartlett, who have been around for a long time, and they're very impressed with the way that the Suns have turned things around, and especially with the player drain to come back actually achieve a bit of success and to be able to sort of grind out games and show that there's a new style which is yet to, really yield the results. But it's encouraging for such a young team. It's only going to get better. And then you get the morons in the press who keep on cracking on that the Suns should be dissolved and the franchise should be given to Tasmania, all in the same week. I mean, I prefer to go with the old heads who have been following it the whole time, and they can see that there's a lot of a lot of good news happening on the Gold Coast. And of course, when we watch our younger players who are 18 and 19 and they lose to a really experienced team like Sydney, who average age-wise was about the same, and there were a lot of reasons to sort of think that maybe we'd have a chance of winning the game, especially with last year's game as a comparison. But realistically, going to Sydney, there aren't that many teams that are confident of a win going to Sydney. So, and only a few each year come away with a win. So it wasn't us, onto the home game. We happen to be playing Richmond, who play a bit of a similar style to Sydney, so it looks a bit bleak. But think back to that first half where a few more opportunities that if they'd been capitalised on, then might have gone in with 2 or 3 goal lead, which might have changed the story at the end of the game.
Yeah. Look, it's been 9 years of poor performances at the Suns with, like you said, there was that blip in 2014. I just wonder how long fans can hold on for. It's those that jumped on board at the start either have a primary team and the Suns are their second team, or they've switched from having a team, myself being Adelaide, yourself being Brisbane, and following the Gold Coast Suns as their primary team. It's very hard to sit here and watch my former team perform, and I'd say it would be the same for you watching Brisbane perform as they have this year, and wonder why the Suns aren't anywhere near. They're still, now they're on the bottom of the ladder. Is it the first time we've been bottom?
Well, it's the first time we've been 18th. I dare say we might have briefly occupied 18th. Remember, we were the 17th team to come in, and we came 17th in the first season, and GWS were the 18th team, and they came 18th in their first couple of seasons. Okay,
so that first season in 2011, we still came 17th.
Well, that's the only wooden spoon we've had. Which is,
I can't remember that far back.
Win.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a small win. We've come 17th plenty of times. One of those times it was 17 out of 17, but the other 3 times have been 17th out of 18 teams, and the other times have been better than 17th. So, I think there's something there. I mean, if teams that have been around and have had all the advantage of having, lots of members and playing in front of large crowds, and teams like Collingwood and the West Coast, they've had recruitment for as much as 15 years. That's guys who are running around who are 34, 35, 36 who are still playing A-grade football. They were recruited such a long time ago, and the Suns just haven't got anywhere near that depth of recruitment. Our oldest players that were first recruited when we were first building the list before we were even playing AFL football are 27. We've got players in their 30s, but they're players we had to draft in. It's going to take a few years before we've got depth of players who we drafted and we developed from the very first, who are just immersed in Suns culture, to be able to sort of really compete for that premiership flag. I really believe that we're not going to win it next year, but we could push for finals if the third year of Stuart Dew's plan comes to fruition. It's very disappointing if it doesn't happen. Look at a side like the Demons, so many years in the doldrums, they had 1 year up in the finals, and now they could finish last. They're a strong chance of the wooden spoon because they have to play Carlton, and the Suns are, potentially going to win another couple of games. So, it's not like we're the only team that's really struggling. It's just hard to always be that team.
I struggle to see how the Suns are going to win another game this year, but anything can happen, as we saw on the weekend with Carlton beating Fremantle. I didn't think that would happen, especially with Cripps out. But something I want to put out to our live listeners, let us know what you think about or how you're going following the Suns. It's been 9 years of poor performances. And also, I know it's a tried debate, but what can the AFL do to fix up the Suns? Have they done enough? Should they do more? Or should they just acknowledge that they screwed up in the first place and what's done is done and, leave the status quo? I'd like to thank our Patreon donors, Old Soul, Jack's dad, Paul Vosti, Tom Kim, Chris Moore and James Wood for their continued support of the GCSUNScast. We would love more people to jump on board and help support the show. It's times of the year like this where it's a real struggle as a Suns fan to want to get up and pay attention to the club, let alone put together a show for other Suns fans. It's certainly challenging this time of year trying to find content that keeps people interested and keeps people absorbed. And the thought that we've got the financial support and also the vocal support of fans through our Facebook page and listening to us, talking to us, really encourages us to keep moving on. So it's very highly valued and we thank you all for your support. All right, Tom. Well, let's get into some of the news this week. So we've got some serious injury news come through today. Sam Collins is out for the season with his ongoing hip issue. It doesn't sound like the hip has healed up as much as the doctors were hoping, and therefore it means he's out for the rest of the season as they try to manage the workload and get him right for next year. So it's terrible news for the Suns. He was one of our key players in our first few weeks, essentially winning us the game against Fremantle in round 2.
Yeah, look, I really feel for Sam. He's come from having to guts it out in the VFL and get a full-time job to keep his hopes alive. But I reckon that this sort of the language around this is to sort of say, look, the treatment that we've given him means that he's not on track to return anytime soon. And so we're taking another much safer route, and that is to sort of decondition, because these players are finely tuned. They put in a whole pre-season, they train every week. They're really the sports science behind it is just mind blowing. And so to basically run his muscle tone down and to keep any pressure off, and it's a hip, it's a really a weight bearing joint, and I've got a bit of a bad hip just from being really active as a younger person, and I know what it's like. You sort of have to, when it flares up, you have to just take all weight off it, and of course it has secondary effects like your back and all the rest of it. So I can sort of see what's sort of going on here, and I don't think that I don't think that a finals bound team would be doing this. A finals bound team would be trying to get him to get back maybe in 5 or 6 weeks, but we're just saying, look, just suspend all hope. You're gonna basically go into your off season now, and then you're gonna have to have rehab. And then he'll be ready to go with the fittest of the fit blokes in the pre-season, and he'll come back better than ever. Because I'm not saying that
it's not great. We've got Holman as well out indefinitely with a back issue, and that's going to cause some serious concerns as well. Because the way that back issue has happened, that was a big issue for him in the pre-season. Yeah. And from experience, back injuries don't just go away, especially when it's stress related in the back. That's something
it's a very,
he's managing.
very, very, very complex sort of part of your anatomy, and a lot of the reason it hurts so much is that there's so many nerves and other things going on there that they all pull and push and it must be agony for the poor guy. I'm surprised he got through half a season and played the level of footy that he did, because he's one of our quiet achievers who doesn't always blast away on the stats, but he certainly does the job each week, and we really missed him.
Yeah, and we've got some good news though. So it's not all doom and gloom with the latest injury report. Sean Lemons is a test, and he should return hopefully in the NEFL this week. So that's good to see that. And we also have Bowes and Ainsworth only 3 weeks away. So That's great news to see those blokes hopefully coming back and playing a part in the last quarter of the season.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we're really, we can't wait for Bowes and Ainsworth to come back, because they're just guns. And they'll come straight back into the AFL team. Don't worry about that. The Sean Lemons, I don't know where we're going to fit him in our forward line in the NEFL. He might go into the midfield, and I think a few of his opponents will be sort of just waiting, bracing themselves, because Sean Lemons loves to hit people. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in the AFL team reasonably soon himself. So really good news.
Yeah. All right, well, with that, let's talk about the NEFL, and it was a great result for the Suns.
It was indeed. It was a bit of an up-and-down affair. The Suns were trying to make a bit of a statement in the first quarter, and by making that statement, they kind of didn't really get their avenues to goal, and that took a little while to sort of warm up to that, but basically winning through the middle against some really, really top-notch Sydney opponents. I mean, the Swans are a pretty deep club from the first pick down to the bottom of their list, and they had a lot of AFL listed players who were in good form and looked ready to rip us to pieces. But really pleasingly, the Suns' forward line in the second quarter just came to life. Josh Corbett was amazing. He was grabbing onto everything that was kicked his way. But most pleasing was that players were looking for him and honouring his leads. And he was catching everything from a chest mark on a long lead to a pack mark right above his head that he, against players who were taller than him, and more than one of them, trying to knock him out of the contest. Just loved it. And then at half-time, when things sort of looked like the Suns might have a chance of winning the game, you could sort of see that there were other players who were looming. Connor Nutting came out and kicked 3 goals in the third quarter alone. Corbett kept kicking goals, ended up with 6 in the end. Isaac Rankin was the guy who we were looking for. Ended up with 10 touches and probably had an involvement in about 4 or 5 of those goals. Pretty quiet, really, but overall. But when he did get the ball, geez, classy. That article about him, how classy he is. They're not exaggerating. All the players know how good he is. The public's about to find out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Gold Coast Suns play Redland this week. I believe it is Saturday. It's probably actually the precursor game to the Suns Richmond. So if you're interested, get along early to the Metricon game and get a glimpse of Isaac Rankin playing in the NEFL, because I highly doubt he's going to go straight into the AFL. He was on limited minutes in that NEFL game and only played about 60%. But let's finish up with the NEFL. The Gold Coast Suns defeated Sydney 105-77. Corbett kicked 6 goals. Andrew Swallow pulled on the boots again with 3. Nutting had 3 goals, Murdoch 2 goals, and Rankin 1.
It should be said that Spitter, which was what all the players were shouting out, Spitter. 2 of his goals were from free kicks, but he was playing hard footy, which he always did in his AFL career, and he earned them, and he was in the middle getting clearances all day. So yeah, he looked like he was having heaps of fun. I hope he pulls the jersey on again, because we didn't miss Risha because Spitter played. So yeah, good fun game to watch. The defense was spectacular. The best player on the ground was Jordan Murdoch. really hope he gets a recall this week because we could really use a big left-footed, physical, pacey winger.
Yeah, well, the AFL site has a weekly who's next in line sort of article, and this week they talked about the performances of George Hall-Smith and Aaron Young. Now, I've seen you've had a different perspective as the reporter that wrote the article on those two players. You weren't impressed with their performance, Tom?
Well, I mean, let's talk about Aaron Young first. He had a decent game. It wasn't a banging the door down for senior selection game by any stretch. His numbers at the end of the game look all right, but the vision of him in the final quarter, which it must be said, the Swans probably had a few cracks at trying to bridge the gap, and the quality of the Suns meant that it was a decent gap in the end. But the Swans did kick 5 goals in that final quarter, and guys like Aaron Young were out on their feet and just not able to finish the game strongly. Whereas George Hall-Smith couldn't get into the game for the first half, and he did finish the game strongly, but that's equally poor. You know, like we were behind on the scoreboard until the third quarter. So I don't think that, I think whoever's written this article, they haven't watched it. A lot of people who write about the NEFL don't watch it. They just go and look at the stats and check up with a few people. Hall-Smith and Young probably wouldn't have even been in my top 5 for that NEFL game. Jacob Heron, Jacob Dawson were both tremendous, as they usually are. The defence was really good, especially the tall defenders like Jack Leslie and Chris Burgess and Caleb Graham. They were linking up. There was one time when they linked up by handball, because the game, the ground they're playing on isn't the biggest AFL ground. It's in Blacktown. So they hooked up along the back line and got it out to Murdoch, who just went racing down the wing, like 4 or 5 bounces, and he's popped it up, and it ended up being a goal. And coast to coast, just good stuff. The stuff you kind of expect the senior side to be capable of, because we do have a good back line and they are confident of kicking the ball to each other, but we just don't seem to switch it up that much, and we don't really have any pacey threats except Jordan Murdoch back from injury, 20-odd touches, couple of goals. He was really goal square to goal square along the wing, and that's what you want in a winger.
And we suspect Jordan Murdoch will find his way straight back in the senior side this week when they take on Richmond. So let's move on to the AFL side. Sydney, 14 goals, 93. Defeated Gold Coast Suns, 7 goals, 51. McPherson, the only multiple goal scorer for the Suns with 2 goals. And a lot of players were down on their usual performance. It was very hard to watch the game. Now, I know the Suns this year have been playing a more contested, slower, congestion sort of game. But this game was just a lot harder to watch in general. The first quarter wasn't too bad. The Suns managed to kick away early, and then Sydney caught up. Then the Suns got another one. Sydney got another one. It's sort of trading blows there. But it just didn't really seem to click out of third gear for the Suns. And then in the third quarter, Sydney went straight into fifth gear.
Yeah, I didn't see it exactly the same as you've seen it. Look, I think that overall, yes, the Swans did have another gear, but I kind of thought that the Swans were kind of lucky to go into half time in front. I thought the Suns were the better team. Particularly when midway through the second quarter, the Suns got 2 goals in a row, which is usually a pretty good indicator that things are happening, right? And then very quickly the Swans got 2 goals back, and you were just like, that's a bit of a wasted opportunity because, getting that third and maybe a fourth goal, but the Swans were very, very determined in the middle to get that, take advantage of that 6-6-6, and we were exposed.
And And that's what happened in the pre-season when Gold Coast played Sydney in one of the JLT games. We got smashed in that middle because of that 6-6-6 rule, and it really, really showed us up. I mean, I think Sydney went on a scoring spree in that game of 9 unanswered goals. And that is a part of what happened. But considering Sydney were missing their primary ruckman for a majority of that game, so not only that, they were missing that they were one short on the bench with their rotations. The Suns, for a majority of that game, should have been able to match it, and then they shouldn't have faded as much as what they did.
I actually think that the ruck thing, it sounds weird, but the ruck thing, it kind of ended up being at times, obviously not in the ruck contests themselves, because the Suns just, dominated that. But actually, and I mean, the ruck replacements that they ended up having, they weren't terrible. They just weren't wits. And I don't know why we kept it. We put Peter Wright back in the ruck. What the hell was Wright was on fire for looking at scoring goals in the first half, and as usual, they've tired him out by sending him through the ruck, and then he couldn't stick marks and like. But Sam Day's there to be the backup ruckman and to wear out their backup, and what we needed was to put Sam Day on Alir and to do his best to follow him around the ground, because what was happening was Alir would go straight from the centre ruck or straight from the stoppages and then go to where the action was at, and Jared Witts just couldn't play on him. He could win the tap on him, but he couldn't defend against him. So they turned it. It was quite, it was a necessity that did it. I think there was a couple of other games over the weekend that had similar things where the number one ruckman went out and that team ended up winning the game. It's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? Do you send in a Shane Mumford-sized ruckman who can be useful around the ground, or do you play a Witts-type ruckman who can get 45, 50, 60 hit-outs and then you lose so many games in a row?
You make a good point there, because the current mid strategy when we win the ruck contest is to drop the ball straight to ground, create the contest. But essentially, with Sydney losing Sinclair and then turning Alir into their ruckman, they had essentially an extra midfielder. Alir is a very mobile, agile player, and it just played into Sydney's hands with that strategy, because they'd have Alir pretty much there straight away to grab the ball or to be a runner and be on the outside, as we saw on a couple of occasions, to move the ball forward for Sydney.
You'd almost prefer them to have like a ruck rule where if the player goes up unopposed, it's a free kick. Because ever since forever in the AFL, it's two ruckmen against each other. And a lot of the time what was happening was Alir or Reed would go up sort of late or half-heartedly in the ruck contest and create that extra ground person. So if you've got a big 6'8" bloke who's not going up, and then, he's 105 kilos, so he goes bullocking through the midfielders and ends up with the ball or affecting the clearance. It's not right, and that's a lot of teams do that against Wits. And if that's a way to win, then it's within the rules. But I don't know that it should be.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, there's a lot of other things that weren't great. I actually turned the game off halfway through that fourth quarter. Watched the rest later on. I was just so furious with the performance. The amount of turnovers in that second half was disgusting. Watching players essentially hand the ball to a Sydney player on a silver platter, they were handballing directly to some of these Swans players.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. The disposal efficiency was very poor.
And it wasn't like it was a wet night. I know it had been wet in Sydney.
You could see that it was a bit dewy, but if the other team can stick the marks and stick the hand passes, why can't our team?
Yeah, so it was a really disappointing effort, and I think a week ago I wouldn't have had any expectation on the Suns for this game. I was actually very scared about what Franklin could do to us with our lack of defenders. But he was a withdrawal due to a hamstring, and as the game got closer, teams were announced, and we saw on paper that the Suns and Sydney actually matched up quite evenly.
They do.
Same age group, same amount of games of experience. It looked like if Gold Coast had a chance of getting a win anytime soon, this would be the game, considering what they did last year as well. But it wasn't to be, and that's probably why it was just so disappointing, because we've got our hopes up and we thought we were a chance, and in the end it wasn't anywhere near it. We put in 2 good quarters, and I'd argue the other 2 quarters were bang average.
One of the things that the Suns are yet to really produce, but I think it's in the production line, is a player like Jordan Dawson, who is renowned as the best kick in the NEAFL, and on a small, admittedly it's a small sample, but on his AFL form, he's elite at his kicking efficiency. And Jordan Dawson against us was just picking our defence apart by finding targets 45, 50 metres away and hitting them on the chest. He ended up being their second highest possession getter as well, which is sort of, for the position he was playing, they were finding him, putting him in space and trusting him to be able to kick it across our midfield and into our forward line, which our defenders, when you've got a really good midfielder or halfback who can kick it a long way accurately, they can put it to the advantage of the player they're kicking to, and it's hard to defend against. And we saw it time and time again. The commentators picked it up early, and every time I saw it and I heard them say it, I was like, oh no, Dawson's got the ball, we're stuffed. He's been playing NEAFL for 3 years. So they've uncovered a couple of... And the other guy they had was James Rowbottom. He's on top of the NEAFL best and fairest by a mile. He possibly will win it without playing any more NEAFL games. Not exactly that far in front. So they've got really good talent to call on. And I think we do too, but we've still... We had a couple of passengers.
Yeah. Look, that Dawson from Sydney that you were talking about, I really rated him, and I was quite, I wouldn't say devastated, but I wasn't far off it when I heard the news during the week that he'd re-signed with Sydney for 2 years. Yeah. Because I thought he was a prime target.
They really push their players in the NEAFL, and they just say, look, you're going to get the first grade spot eventually, but you're just going to have to stick it out and just keep showing us that you can really play this top level footy and fix the things up in your game, so that when they do come in, there's no difference.
Yeah,
they can lose an A grader and he will still do the job.
Yeah, I thought he was a prime target for the Suns to go after. With Stuart Dew's connections to Sydney, I thought we were a real shot at getting a bloke like him, offering him more midfield time. And unfortunately, he's decided to stay at Sydney for another 2 years. And we saw what he's capable of on the weekend. So that was just a double blow there for me. All right,
can I ask you a question? Could you tell me who was who had the best? You might have it in front of you, but who had the best disposal efficiency of the Suns off the top of your head?
Homsch, 80%, 5 disposals.
You've got it in front of you. Would you have said that if you didn't know that? Would you have looked at Lukosius, Powell, Ellis and Brodie as being the most effective with the ball in their hands?
No, I wouldn't. And that's what I wanted to get into next. It was really hard to pick a top 3 for mine this week. Not too many standouts. I thought a lot of players that normally get high possessions had poor games by their standards. So my top three is more of the players that I thought played above themselves or showed another level that we haven't seen before. So my first one is for Ellis. Ellis had 21 disposals, 71% disposal efficiency. I think he's in his 2 games, he's had over a combined 40 disposals. And that's pretty impressive. I don't think he's put those numbers up before when he was at Richmond. So we're really seeing what he can do. And based on his disposal efficiency, he knows how to use the ball. So it's really good that we've got him coming out the back half. And hopefully we actually see him migrate into the midfield a bit more. He probably isn't doing it this year because he had a interrupted pre-season. So, but next year, hopefully he gets that pre-season in, builds up that tank, and we see him going through the middle more because he is capable of being that midfielder. And if we can,
that's his best position. He's slumming it in the back line. It's helped our back line. Don't forget, our back line's pretty sharp this year. They're not allowing massive scores or huge margins, and he slotted in nicely when injury sort of required someone to step up.
Yeah,
pretty happy with him. I've got him for 2 points, but for 1 point, and it's probably more of a little bit generous, let's say, because it wasn't a 4-quarter performance, but it probably reflected the whole team's performance. And I've got Jack Lukosius for a point, for 3 points, sorry. Purely because he just started the game just so well. It was so good to see him taking marks, being super confident, contested marks, and just being that player who could just go out and just belt the ball 55 metres to it onto the chest of a running player. We don't have defenders who can do that, and there are other teams who do, like West Coast with Jeddah. We need and Herd. We need players in the back line who can take marks and then get it out of there. And he was doing it really confidently. Unfortunately, it wasn't a 4-quarter performance, but a real sign of what we can expect. And how good is he since we've chucked him back?
Yeah, he's great. I had him down for 2 points, so he was my next in line. Old Soul on the chat as well says he loved the look of him at half back, and that actually is something I've been thinking about for a while now. We drafted Ben King with the aim that he was going to be a defender to eventually replace Stephen May. It seems like Ben King struggled with obviously being a young kid in his first year of AFL to play key defence in the JLT games. So shortly after they moved him forward, and we've seen him at AFL level show he has what it takes to be a forward. Now, that's all great, but then I'm worried that we've lost that defender that we needed. Maybe Jack Lukosius is the answer. Maybe he's that gun centre-half back, and we drafted him as a forward, a centre-half forward, and maybe centre-half back is his position. He looks so comfortable down there, so natural, and he is one of the best kicks in the competition.
He's so
using
accurate.
the ball
and when he's
so
accurate. He's up.
Yeah.
He's a confidence player.
We've got the South Australian trio of Hompsch, Ballard and Lukosius down there.
Yeah,
they're dominating.
McLennan might get up from the knee in the next few weeks. Maybe we go for an all South Australian backline. We can maybe we do that for.
Maybe let's wait till Harbs and Hanley retire. All right.
Sam Day's another one who could go back to Mark Lynchy.
Yeah, I've got a different opinion on that. I think Sam Day's a forward. We have seen him play well in the back line, but we need him to be a forward, and that's where I think
he could be an option to send back if things aren't going well. I want to very, very quickly mention Craig Cameron just after the draft in November, so way back then, said, yep, we've picked up three guys in the top 6. We've got Lukosius, who's a great forward, but we think maybe he could play back to begin with. And we've got Ben King, who's a great forward, but he's also played back, and we've got those options. So we knew from back then that they didn't know what they had. And now it seems to have fallen down in the right order, in my opinion. The next year or two, I think we'll see Luko down back and Ben King up front. And it could always switch Vicky Verkey. Ben King might be the long-term replacement for Rory Thompson. But yeah, we'll see about that.
Okay. All right, well, let's finish off the votes. My 3 votes went to the player of the match, Anthony Miles. His performance, his pressure in and under contested work. You can watch a special highlights package that's on the Suns site at the moment, and it just shows his skill getting the ball out, getting to good positions. So, and he had a goal as well to add to his 21 disposals.
He doesn't get many goals, Miles. He gets a lot of behinds, but good on him. And I thought it was great to see him doing well. I didn't give him votes. For a midfielder, it takes a bit more than what he gave. I went way out of the box here and gave the third vote, the third place one vote, to Brad Shear, who in his first game of the year came in and severely negated Jakey Lloyd. And Lloyd usually gets 30 touches. He got 16. Lloyd's one of those guys who's tremendous with the ball. He really gives them that turnaround out of the backfield, and Shear just negated him. It was an interesting role, a forward defender. He got a goal out of it, had us up and going early. He was never meant to be in the game as a high possession winner, but he still manages to get a few goals, got a goal behind and a goal assist. So, he was active in the forward line as well. I wouldn't mind seeing him doing the similar sort of role. Not too sure exactly who he would be on or who he'd be negating, but Brad Shear, well done. Don't think he's necessarily going to be straight back out of the side because he played a role, and Stewie Jew loves those guys. Maybe he'll be the Nick Holman against Richmond.
Yeah. Old Soul's in the chat as well. His looks like his top 3 is going to Lockie Weller. Weller had a great game, I thought, as well, and he probably deserves the...
Lockie Weller, what a performance!
He probably deserves that for the disallowed goal at the end of that game. I do not know how the AFL goal review system works anymore.
I do.
I don't think anyone
I
does.
found out about it. I found out a bit about this. The reviewers get paid $250 per match. Sounds like a bit of all right. They're not umpires. They're not qualified in any sort of way. They're people who work for the AFL in office jobs or whatever, and they do it for a bit of money for jam. It's a disgrace. It's a scandal that's building because nobody likes it, and they are a joke.
So was the goal umpire's decision a goal? Was it overturned or was it? The goal umpire
couldn't see it because it was 50 metres away. So it was they looked at it on the vision, and from the vision, apparently, they could see the ball hitting the friggin' some sort of deviation.
They must have had different vision to what everyone else had, because footage, that's clear as day. You can't say it was conclusively touched. No. And Lockie Weller's unlucky.
Yeah, but I mean, by then it was all over. So he's just shrugged his shoulders. Look, I agree with Old Soul. Weller was a really good player. I just wanted to shine a light on Sheary. Weller's been in our best ever since he came back. I want to say this. Weller had 5 stoppage clearances, and I spent about probably half the game on the wing, which is where he needs to be.
Right.
So hopefully we can see him actually start on the wing. Instead of pinch hitting there, because that's putting him in the midfield. He's not an inside mid; he's an outside mid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you for joining us on the GCSUNScast. We'll be back next week to discuss the Richmond game. We've got former captain Thom Lynch, potentially Prestia as well, and Josh Caddy, 3 former Suns that left in contentious decisions. And we'll see how we go, whether we give them a good booing, give them a good showing and thank them for coming, or what. All right, go Suns.
Years, I'm predicting. Go Suns.